I adopted 3 children who were abandoned in front of my house, and now, 7 years later, their biological father is back and demanding that I give them back, and I don't know what to do. I've been a firefighter in my town for over a decade. It's a small community, so you get to know a lot of people over the years, especially during tough times. 7 years ago, on my day off, something happened that I'll never forget. I was just grilling some meat in the backyard and having a drink when a man showed up in front of my house. He looked visibly out of it, probably drunk or on something, and had 3 small kids with him. The kids didn't seem to understand what was going on. The man started yelling about how he couldn't raise his kids anymore, how his life had turned into hell, and how he knew I was a decent man because of my job. Before I could even process what he was saying, he basically shoved the kids toward me and walked away. I was completely stunned. My first reaction was to make sure the kids were okay. I brought them inside, gave them food, and tried to talk to them, but they couldn't explain much. They just cried and kept asking for their mom, who, I later found out, had been out of their lives for quite a while. I called my station and explained the situation, and they told me to contact the police, which I did right away. The officers came, spoke to the kids, and tried to locate the father, but he had completely disappeared. Days turned into weeks, and no one came forward to claim the kids. Since I was the one who had taken them in initially and was caring for them in the meantime, there isn't an orphanage in my town. Social services contacted me to discuss the next steps. I honestly don't know what drove me to make the decision I made. Maybe it was the look in the kids' eyes, so scared and lost, or maybe it was the fact that I'd always wanted a family and had already grown attached to them during the time they were with me. But when they mentioned that the kids would be placed for adoption if no one came forward, I felt a huge weight on my chest. I spoke to my family, thought long and hard, and decided that if it was possible, I'd adopt them myself. It was a long process, full of paperwork and court visits, but in the end, I did it. In just a few months, I went from being the local firefighter to being a father of 3. I won't lie, it was tough. They came to me with so much trauma, so much emotional baggage, and I had to learn how to be a dad from scratch. But over time, we bonded. Today, I see them as my kids because that's exactly what they are. Fast forward 7 years. They're happy, healthy, and well-adjusted. My eldest daughter is now a teenager and incredibly kind and polite. My middle son is obsessed with soccer and dreams of going pro, and my youngest is currently fixated on dogs. We're a normal family with ups and downs, but we're doing great. Then, last week, everything turned upside down. The biological father showed up. I have no idea how he found my address since I've since moved to a larger neighboring city to give my kids better opportunities, but there he was, standing on my doorstep like nothing had happened. He told me he wanted his kids back. He said he had fixed his life and that it was time to reunite the family. I was speechless. We talked in the backyard while the kids were at school. He said he regretted leaving the kids but that back then, he wasn't in a good mental state. I asked him where he'd been all these years and why he never reached out to social services or even tried to check in with the kids. He dodged the question, saying it didn't matter and that what mattered was that he was here now. Then he dropped this, I'm their father, and I want them back. Plus, a friend told me I could get government benefits because of them, so it'll be good for us financially. I was floored. He wasn't asking to come back because he missed them or wanted to make things right. He wanted them back for money. I was so angry I had to take a deep breath to avoid losing my temper. I told him I'd think about what he said and asked him to leave. Of course, there's no way I'm ever giving them back after what he said. But ever since, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. I love my kids, and I know that, legally, he might have a chance to regain custody. The fact that he showed up out of nowhere with this ridiculous demand has completely thrown me off. I'm scared about how this might affect my kids if they find out he's back. So far, I haven't told them, and I'm not even sure if I should. They rarely talk about their biological father, and I don't even know if they remember much about him. I'm consulting a lawyer to understand my rights and figure out how to protect my family. I don't want that man to have any influence on my kids' lives, but at the same time, I'm not sure if it's wrong to deny them contact with their biological father if that's something they'd want. Has anyone been through something similar? Any advice on how to handle this? Update, first of all, I want to thank everyone who commented on my last post. There were so many pieces of advice and supportive messages that helped me think more clearly. Sometimes, we get so caught up in our own problems that we end up feeling like we're alone, but you all really showed me that I was right to protect my kids and that the love and care I have for them is what truly matters. I wanted to give you all an update on what happened because things got even more complicated after I wrote that post. I decided the best way to handle everything was to tell the kids about what was happening, in a way they could understand, of course. It was a tough conversation. I called the 3 of them, sat down with them in the living room, and explained that their biological father had shown up and was saying he wanted to have contact with them again. The 2 youngest, to be honest, barely reacted. My middle child asked, who, and when I explained, he just shrugged and went back to playing with his toy cars. The youngest didn't seem to understand who I was talking about either. They clearly had no memory of their biological father, and that gave me a little relief because it made me realize that, in their minds, I had always been their only dad. My oldest, on the other hand, was more affected. She remembers some things from when they lived with their biological father, but they're not good memories. She told me that, even as a small child, she remembered him yelling a lot and not taking care of them properly. She said she feels safe with me and doesn't want to see her biological father at all. I respected her feelings but made it clear that if she ever changed her mind, we could talk about it. At that point, everything seemed to be under control. But then things started to spiral. As I mentioned in the last post, the biological father was determined to gain custody of the kids, and he actually filed a lawsuit against me. I wasn't too worried because I knew I had legal custody of the kids and that he hadn't shown any interest in them for years. My lawyer was confident the case would be resolved in my favor. But then came the shock. He managed to win in the first instance. I'm not exactly sure how, but it seems like he had some sort of influence over the local judge. The judge ruled that the biological father had the right to try to rebuild a relationship with his children and that I was being unreasonable by not allowing it. It was decided that he would have joint custody and could take the kids for weekends. I was stunned. So was my lawyer. He said he'd never seen a ruling like that in such a clear-cut case. Fortunately, we were able to appeal. My lawyer managed to get the case moved to another state, away from the biological father's influence. That gave us a new sense of hope, but the process was long and stressful. In the meantime, the biological father started showing up more frequently outside my house, as if trying to intimidate me. He didn't confront the kids, but just having him there made everyone uncomfortable. I called the police a few times, but he always left before they arrived. Finally, after months, the case was retried. And this time, we won. The court recognized that he had abandoned the kids for years, that my adoption was legal, and that forcing the kids to have contact with him now would be harmful, especially with my oldest's testimony. He lost all the rights he had and was even ordered to pay court costs. It was an enormous relief. I thought we could finally move on with our lives, but sadly, that wasn't the end of the story. A few days after the ruling, he showed up at my house in the middle of the night and completely destroyed my garden. He tore out the flowers my kids and I had planted together, smashed the pots, and scattered dirt everywhere. It was a horrible sight. Luckily, I had security cameras installed, and they caught everything. I took the footage straight to the police, and he was arrested for trespassing and vandalism. That also helped me secure a restraining order that prevents him from coming near my house or family again. Now, I finally feel like this chapter is closed. I'm still rebuilding the garden with the kids and gave them some vague excuse about what happened so they wouldn't feel paranoid, and we're trying to get back to our routine. The most important thing is that they're safe and know they're loved. Once again, I just want to say thank you to everyone who supported me and gave me the strength to fight for them. Being a dad is the greatest challenge of my life, but it's also my greatest joy. And I'd do it all over again for them.